We'll walk out there and kind of look. We just wanted to talk about the grasses and what these horses are eating and what they're needing and what overpopulation does. But I'm Lisa Grant, and I'm the wild horse specialist for the Burns District BLM, and so I am in charge of monitoring and managing 6 herd management areas on our district, and I share with someone over the mountain here on a couple too. But part of my job is to come out here and check the horse's health, their conditions, the condition of the range, if there's water available, and things like that. And so, and do help with the counts when we fly. But let's walk out here. I want you guys to get an idea of what the grass is and what the range looks like and why it's different compared to like maybe where you live or a lot of other parts of the eastern United States. It's very different. So let's walk out here. Alright, so as you guys walk across that, you noticed a lot of bare ground, right? Just dirt, no grasses or anything. And in like our desert systems, that's normal. There is supposed to be bare ground to an extent. And then this is a perennial bunch grass. I saw another one here. We're getting a little slim here. This is Thurber's needlegrass. That's crested wheatgrass, I think. It's grazed down pretty heavy, or blue bunch wheatgrass, I'm not sure. But those are the desirable species here. Those are the species that we want to maintain health and vigor because then they're more resilient to species like cheatgrass that come in and they're invasive annual grasses that they don't have a high nutrient content. They take over the range. They are a flashy fuel, so if there's a fire start, they just go fast and they make these mega fires that we have. And so we want to keep our native perennials healthy so that they're resilient to those invasions. Trouble is, like right now, you see that most of these are grazed down pretty heavily, even under like these bushes where they should be protected. But the animals have been doing a pretty thorough search for these plants. That's a good indication that that's too heavy of use. Like you don't want to see use like that because they're searching for feed, right? So, and we're supposed to be maintaining these animals year round out here. And so that's why we set appropriate management levels for horses, where we have a low range to start at, say 100, like this herd management area is 159 horses to 304 horses. That's where we want to be at. We want to maintain those numbers so that we know that year round they're going to have all the resources that they need. They're not going to be struggling. They're not going to be searching for water. That's a really bad situation when that happens, when they're running out of water, especially. And they're also, we're a multiple use agency, so we do have livestock grazing out here. We do have wildlife that need to have resources too, so we need to just maintain that balance. And just for the record, this year, this field was never grazed by any livestock. This is all horse use right now that we're seeing. But right now, our estimates for the population on this herd management area is 979 adults, and they're going to probably produce about 200 foals this year. So we're way over our appropriate management level, and we're really starting to see it on the range in these lower pastures where they really like to stay lower. Sometimes they'll go high in the summer and then come down with the elevation in the winter. But it just becomes an issue because our growing season is a really short time in the spring and into the early summer. And when those horses are hitting these desirable perennial grasses during that growing season, those plants during that short time when they do get a chance to grow, they have to really pull from their reserves and their roots and try to get that seed out so they can reproduce that year. And once they've done that, they've pulled their reserves from their roots, then they're struggling already, those plants. And so if we do that every year, the horses or any grazer comes and grazes these desirable plants every year during the growing season, it weakens them. And that's not what we want to see out here. So that's why we like to maintain our livestock numbers in a certain way, rotate them through at different times of the year on these grasses when we can, and keep our horse numbers at a low enough level where they're not going to be really impacting that range and degrading it basically. And so we are at a point now, definitely we need to be able to take some action by removing horses somehow. And the program as a whole is trying to do research on different types of fertility control vaccines or different surgical treatments that we could do. It's a slow process trying to get everyone and the public on board with agreeing that which routes to take. But we're always open to more ideas on ways to make it effective, where we don't have to handle these horses constantly because it's stressful to them, it's dangerous to us and them, and so we don't really want to be touching them every year. Really, I don't think that it's a good thing if we want to keep them wild out here. But there's lots of there's options out there that we need to keep looking into, I think. And if you know researchers that want to try something, they can definitely contact the BLM and try to figure something out. But yeah. So.
You guys will see too on the road, you'll see all the tracks. I mean, that shows you how many horses are here. I mean, it's not normal to see that many. I mean, even if you're not seeing the horses, you know they're here because it's, I mean, there's just tracks everywhere. Yeah. So that might be something you guys can look at when we're going up.
Yeah, it's kind of, I try to put it into perspective too, and I don't know how familiar you guys are with like elk and deer and wildlife, and you see them occasionally. It's really exciting and they're wild, but you don't see their, you don't normally see their impact on the range. You don't see those stud piles or elk piles up the roads, you know. But if you did, you would think, gosh, there's a lot of elk here. You know, it seems different. And so that's what I'm seeing with the horses. Like, there's too many here, and you could obviously see it. But I don't want to sound like I don't like horses. I love horses, but I also want to make sure that they have the resources they need so they don't have to struggle on the range. But are there any questions about this or what we do or that topic or fertility control for horses or?
I think, can you say something about the sage grass? So we see it all over here, but they don't eat it, right?
The sagebrush.
Yeah.
Oh, right. So this is sagebrush, native species. It's very, it's not palatable to horses. It's not something they eat. It is something that sage grouse, a sagebrush obligate species, they eat in the wintertime. And, but it's also really good for structure, plant structure. They have deeper roots than like our grasses, and so all those things are important out here to have the structure in your soil for soil stability and the diversity out on the range. But yeah, that's not a plant that a horse is going to eat. And if they do turn to eating that, you have a big problem because it doesn't have the nutrients they need. It's not digestible. So they haven't, luckily, turned to that. But it's something we need out here, and it takes up, you know, the space and the structure that we need. Not sure. And there's rabbit brush also. That's a earlier cereal species that it's a native, but also, again, not palatable. This is Sandberg's bluegrass, which is a native species, but it also will, once your deeper rooted perennial species like stipa and crested, once they go away, Sandbergs will also start coming in. And that's okay, it stabilizes, but it's just, there's not a lot to it. There's not a lot of structure to the roots. There's not a lot for feed for animals. But there's, like I said earlier, if you notice the complete search for forage, the going under the brush, that's, it's not a good sign. And it's also, I talked about sage grouse. They're an important species around here that we're managing for in like the whole Great Basin, and they nest under sagebrush, so they're important for sage grouse also. And when you have animals doing that search for forage under the brush, it's removing nesting cover for sage grouse. So it's also another thing that we don't want to have happening is the animals we're managing taking that away, because sage grouse are on the decline and we want to have everything that they need to increase out here. So.
Well, and that's like you mentioned, you know, somebody that doesn't understand can look out here and go, well, look at all the green. But that doesn't mean that that's adequate feed for these horses.
Sure. And I don't know what it looks like in Germany or I don't know where you're all from, but we get that question a lot. People call me from the East Coast or the Midwest and say, how can you have 500,000 acres and say that only 200 horses can be out there? That just doesn't make sense, you know? And I said, well, we have it as acres per animal unit month. Back east, it's how many animals per acre can live on that. And it's just the opposite here. Plus, our biggest limitation is water availability. We only have so many natural water sources here, and that everything depends on. We can push wells into the ground too and create a man-made source, but if that breaks down, then what? You know, we shouldn't be completely dependent on man-made sources, I don't think. And so, plus we're water limited. We can't just put wells and wells and wells in everywhere either. But that's something that people need to keep in mind, is that our water is limited, and our forage availability is just very different than a lot of places.
So how many acres do you need for one Mustang to keep
For a
pasture and the Mustang healthy?
Yeah, well, we go by animal unit months, so one animal per month or whatever. And a lot of times around on native range, it's about 10 acres.
Okay.
And that's average. It varies, but 10 acres is kind of a good starting point. It goes up in drier, more deserty climates. We have some of those on our district, 30 acres.
Per month?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
I was thinking about, it's compared to the German measures, it's like 13 million hectare.
Oh.
And this is a lot. You count 1 hectare, which is about, I'm not sure, 2 or 3 acres for one horse a year.
Yeah.
for a year.
Yeah,
Right.
That's how you count in Germany.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and you guys got to understand too, like, which Lisa was talking about, different places. You know, there's even on the west side of this state,
Sure.
Grass will grow year round.
Yeah.
This grass only grows in the springtime. You know, after the moisture's on the ground, the snow is melting. That's when you get the growth out of this grass. And then, you know, once we are not getting all the moisture, it's done.
It goes dormant.
Yeah. So it does not grow year round, unless, you know, sometimes if you get a heavy rain or something, but that's not normal.
No. It has to, even for this cheap grass, it has to be, the soil has to be 40 degrees before it can grow, and there's good 6 months sometimes out of the year where that doesn't even happen. So, it's just a huge difference. You know, our precipitation is 10 to 12 inches a year. So there's only so much you can do with that. But
Any questions?
I think it's kind of a long, skinny one. There's a reservoir. It's a man-made reservoir on that other end, and it's a really good one. It lasts most years all the way through.
There's another one up there, I think. Huh?
Yeah, that next field. This field's all water holes. They're man-made water holes, and some of them have springs that kind of trickle into them too. And a couple. There's one spring development on the far side, but the horses don't tend to go over there too. Yeah. That's the thing with horses too, is we have, you know, this one's, 300,000 acres, I think. But there's certain areas they just won't go to. You know, it's a distance from water, there's something about it they don't like. And so sometimes there's areas that they're just not gonna use. And it's really important to realize that too, that some of those areas, it's good to have those reserve areas. Like, they're not using it on a regular basis, but if they were stressed and needed it, it's there, you know. So we don't want to use every inch of this ground on an annual basis. And so having those reserves is a really good thing.